Two Warhammer Horde shooters, same universe, very different highs. By the end, you'll know which one you should play and why. These two aren't just fighting for the Warhammer throne, they're in the running for king of the entire Horde shooter genre. I've got over 420 hours in Darktide and nearly twice that in Space Marine 2, and because I've regularly cleared Auric runs in Darktide and true Solo Absolute runs in Space Marine 2, I've got a unique high-level perspective on the combat systems in both games compared to the other comparisons out there. I love them both to death, but in the end, there can be only one. In this video, we're going to be doing a deep dive comparison into both games and look at the differences between their combat systems, progression systems, build depth, replayability, stability, bugginess, and more. Both games are great, but both games have some clear winners in each of the categories. Section 1. Core Gameplay Comparison. Space Marine 2 is weighty, deliberate, third-person, parry-driven, draws on Soul-style dodge rolls and parries, built for set-piece spectacle and those cool moment power plays. Darktide is faster, dash/push-centric FPS with constant crowd pressure and a strong emphasis on routing from cover to cover under range fire. AI Director. Both use one, but the pressure curve differs. Darktide feels relentlessly wavy with short breathers, while SM2 breathes more, ramping up when you're cruising, easing when you're struggling. This chart visualizes how spawn cadence differs. SM2 cranks up suddenly when you're doing well, which can feel uneven, but also spikes excitement. Control and pressure, how fights actually feel. Darktide does cater to the hardcores a bit more, but Space Marine 2's no slouch. A common criticism of Space Marine 2 is that its clear telegraphs, the blue and red indicators, and generous parry windows on fencing weapons make it easy with limited room for skill expression. There's a kernel of truth in that. If you queue with two players who really know the game, you can cruise through absolute difficulty, but the real test in SM2 is true solo. I don't think a Darktide veteran can just waltz into true solo absolute and full clear within their first 20 hours. It still demands discipline. That said, I do think true Solo Auric, especially Maelstrom, is harder overall because Darktide forces you to manage more simultaneous threats with limited dodge refreshes, stamina suppression, disablers, snipers, and rotating modifiers like toxic clouds. Meanwhile, SM2 has tuned Absolute to a good place, especially after patch 8.0 and 9.0, where solo runs reward mastery without feeling unfair. The difference is where skill expression lives. SM2 throws fewer simultaneous threats, but one mistake can stun lock you and snowball you into a death. It's precision forward. You need to be near perfect with your parry discipline, target priority, and route planning for the whole run. Darktide batters you on multiple axes at once, and you still get punished for errors, but success leans more on tactics, threat triage, and constant repositioning. Both games demand a baseline of mechanics, headshots, clean dodge timing, and strong positioning for any real shot at soloing the harder difficulties. There's plenty of room for skill expression in SM2. The SM2 is easy narrative started when early versions were lighter at the top end and then snowballed via creator discourse. The reputation lingers, but it's outdated. One more nuance. A lot of Auric solo showcases aren't full clears, whereas in SM2 True Solo, you're generally expected to do a full clear if it's going to count as legit. So that does add a little bit of a layer of complexity to the SM2 solo clears. In practicality, Space Marine 2 can feel like a rhythm game or Sekiro rhythm hybrid at times, with you needing to hit multiple parries followed up by a quick dodge. So your mechanical skill is really rewarded, where in Darktide you're more rewarded for tactical awareness and decision making. There is still mechanical skill, but it's not quite so at the forefront. So if you enjoy like rhythm, kind of like Sekiro games with a lot of perfect blocking and dodging, that's probably why you love Space Marine 2 as well. Melee layers. Darktide adds directional swings, push tech, and melee headshot crits. SM2 counters with cinematic specials. The Power Sword, Thunder Hammer, Power Fist all have super cool execution style animations, and they have an excellent weightiness and feedback to them. Durability models. In SM2, armor pips refresh on kills and executions restore contested health. In Darktide, toughness regenerates and is highly build tunable, and it's a little bit more of a robust system because you can modify it with perks, blessing, and class abilities. Stability. Both combat systems are excellent. Darktide feels steadier overall. SM2 still has occasional annoyances. The camera goes wild during execution sometimes, but the clarity and impact keep its ceiling pretty high. Both games have a FOV slider on PC, but Space Marine 2 is still missing that on console, and that's an ongoing sore spot with the community. I asked both communities the same question: what's one thing your game does better than the other? And the patterns came out pretty clear. I had AI analyze every single comment on the thread, and the most common things mentioned were cosmetics and customization, power fantasy and spectacle, and the fact that you can solo play in Space Marine 2 as well as be able to pause. And then for Darktide, the most common were combat and gunplay, movement, flow, pace, controls, and sound and music. And then in this next part, I'll show you some of the most upvoted ones that were the most popular comment. And to not read these word for word, we had faster dev fixes, better cosmetics, and solo play for Space Marine 2 were some of the most highly upvoted ones. And for Darktide, I asked the opposite question about Darktide, and we got Jesper Kidd, who is the soundtrack designer for Darktide. The Darktide soundtracks are just amazing, and they blow Space Marines out of the water. Surprisingly for me, power fantasy, I think a lot of the people are salty that the bolters do not feel how they do in Darktide, and you can only do so much in third person, you know? And then we had melee combat and itemization, which is totally understandable. Those are a lot deeper than Space Marine 2. Combat aside, let's see what keeps players in each game tinkering for hours. Section 2, customization and progression. I'll just call it like I see it here. Space Marine 2 is far behind in this category. Darktide has deep crafting, build pass, blessing, perk chase, rotating modifiers, and just kind of like endless tinkering. Space Marine 2 has low friction progression, faster to a functional build, fewer menus, great for just hopping in and playing without fussing about in a lot of menus. From here, let's go blow for blow on the systems. Darktide's weapon system is awesome. I love how you can grind for different weapon drops and try to get that perfect blessing and weapon perk combo that you want. Space Marine 2's progression is currently simpler and less interconnected than Darktide, so its foundation could support deeper systems if future updates expand on it. To be fair, Darktide has been out since November 2022 and it's had almost 3 times as long to mature. Many players were unhappy about Darktide's launch due to its shallow progression and missing depth, but Fat Shark has since made significant updates that have transformed the game since then. Darktide has 5 classes now with the RBDs, each with unique talent trees and abilities, a detailed crafting system allowing weapon modification, blessing re-rolling, and perk tuning, an in-game currency and shop system for both cosmetics and gear. The unlocked and loaded update open up build diversity enormously, letting players experiment with hybrid or highly specialized loadouts. In Space Marine 2, there's limited class-specific customization. Perk slots and weapons are the main variation points, and even then, the weapons aren't nearly as deep or customizable as Darktide. No crafting systems yet. Weapon stats and perks are fixed once acquired. Progression comes largely from leveling classes and unlocking cosmetics, which Darktide has all of that and then some. Seasonal content has added a couple new weapons and perks, but the pace is slower and the system's less interconnect. Why this matters for replayability: Darktide's crafting and perk systems give players long-term goals beyond just playing matches, farming blessings, optimizing builds, and testing synergy. In Space Marine 2, once you've maxed out your preferred class and found your favorite weapons, there's less to chase. Darktide also has a deeper endgame with Auric missions and Havoc missions. Also, grinding for elite cosmetics like super cool portraits or titles can be a lot of fun. Space Marine 2 has the prestige system and siege mode, but they're shallower in comparison. Section 3, post-launch support and dev communication. The reality is, in the past year, Darktide shipped a new mode in Nightmares and Visions, a full endgame with Havoc, a couple new levels, a campaign rework, and roughly 7 new weapons across new new families. Space Marine 2 has added Siege, Prestige perks, 2 weapons, and 3 operations. On the content, cadence, and scope, Darktide has been hotter this year, but Space Marine 2 has done enough to keep players invested and coming back for the big updates. Darktide had a mixed reception at launch and then trust rebuilt slowly over time. Players have complained of content droughts, but the last year has actually been pretty good. Space Marine 2 started off hot at launch and then has lost some steam over the past year, but overall you could say Space Marine 2 had a better first year than Darktide did, because Darktide had such a bad launch state. If you strictly compare updates in both games over the last 12 months from right now, Darktide has been hotter, but we're getting some weapons, the Tech Marine, and the Year 2 roadmap soon, so I think things are gonna heat up pretty soon for Space Marine, hopefully. Both games have active communities and mod scenes. Space Marine 2 has become more mod friendly lately, with big strides taken by Saber to make it easier for fans to create mods. And the way the devs focus their efforts also shapes the kind of communities these games build. Section 4, Community and Replayability. The communities for both games are strong, but Space Marine 2 currently edges out in concurrent player count. As of August 8th, 2025, Space Marine 2's peak players was 10,241 and Darktide was 6,704. I wanted to clear up a common misconception that I see a lot of people make when they talk about a game's remaining player base online. The 24-hour peak number on SteamDB isn't total daily players. It's just the highest number of people online at the same moment. Actual daily active users, which is referred to as DAU, can be anywhere from 5x to 15x that number. Using a conservative 10x multiplier, we can calculate that on Steam, there would be about 102,000 daily active users and Darktide would have about 67,000, and that's only for Steam. So when you factor in other platforms, I think you could safely double it, but no one can say for sure. Now that we've established both games still have strong player bases, let's dive into how they plan to keep those players for the foreseeable future. Replayability factors. Darktide replayability comes from multiple layers working together. The core is its rotating mission board. Different objectives, enemy densities, and difficulty multipliers shift throughout the day, so no 2 sessions feel the same. Special modes like Havoc and the new Mortis trials offer fresh challenges with mutators and progression systems that keep veteran players engaged. Seasonal events and content drops introduce new weapons, maps, and enemies into the pool, while rotating cosmetic shops and penances give long-term goals for both power and style. Add in its 4 distinct classes, 5 now, with branching talent trees and unique weapon loadouts, and Darktide gives you a huge number of ways to approach the same mission, keeping the grind from feeling too repetitive. Space Marine 2's replayability is more focused on just having fun and working towards getting those perfect runs. While it doesn't have any rotating mission type or mutators as Darktide, it makes up for it with the ability to play solo, intricate melee combat mastery, and a pursuit of perfect run. For many players, replayability here comes from chasing faster and cleaner clears on missions they've already beaten, experimenting with different weapons, classes, perks, character builds to see what works best. New patches often tweak balance, subtly shifting the solo meta and encouraging veterans to return and test fresh strategy. For those who thrive on skill expression, the satisfaction of parrying, chaining kills, and surviving absolute difficulty is what keeps them coming back. In Space Marine 2, most hardcore players keep coming back because they just want to get that solo absolute clear they've been working towards, or just having fun getting friends through harder difficulty. Space Marine 2 is also great on gamepad, where Darktide struggles a bit more due to its first-person nature. So if you want to relax, kick back on the couch, and play on your big TV screen, you can totally do that in Space Marine. Given Space Marine 2's massive sales figures and the enormous buzz it had at launch, some players, myself included, can't help but wonder if Saber missed a golden opportunity in that first year. This was the perfect moment to lean in hard with new DLCs, a battle pass, or more substantial additions like weapons, operations, missions or even new classes to keep the player base engaged long term. To be fair, I understand why Saber may have prioritized stability and polish before ramping up content drops. Space Marine 2's melee heavy combat system means new gear and missions require extra balancing and animation work, and rushing those could have hurt the overall quality. Still, when you compare it to a game like Darktide, which rebuilt its trust with the community through mass sweeping overhauls and additions to the game, SM2's first year starts to feel a little too quiet in terms of playable content. The core gameplay is excellent, but the drip of new experiences hasn't quite matched the appetite of the fan base. My criticism here comes from a place of love for the game, and I want to see Space Marine 2 realize its full potential, and a more aggressive, well-structured content roadmap could help it stand alongside some of the most replayable horde shooters out there. Section 5. Atmosphere and vibe. Both games absolutely do justice to the Warhammer IP, grim, brutal, and drenched in atmosphere, but when it comes to raw visual clarity, Space Marine 2 is a clear winner in my eyes. Even on the RTX 5090 with max settings, Fat Shark's game can have often a slightly muddy, softer image. Space Marine 2, by contrast, is a little sharper and clearer, but less atmospheric. Technical breakdown. Why Space Marine 2 looks cleaner. This next section is ultra nerdy, but I am just kind of into this stuff a little bit, so if you want to skip this section, I'll timestamp it down on the bottom. So, game engines. Space Marine 2 runs on Saber's own Swarm engine. Saber makes use of high-resolution bake lighting and custom per-material shaders, which help textures retain clarity under different lighting conditions. Darktide runs on Fat Shark's in-house Stingray-derived Autodesk Foundation engine, which is a heavily modified version of Autodesk's discontinued Stingray engine. While it's optimized for large, dense crowds and dynamic lighting, its texture streaming system tends to prioritize performance over crispness, especially when many enemies and effects are on screen. Visual clarity. Darktide's environments have a much stronger level of detail. If you stop and look around, there's a surprising amount of detail in the set pieces throughout the levels. Space Marine 2's levels can look a little more empty at times, but makes up for it with the amazing looking scenery in the background and sense of scale. Running both games at maxed out settings, Darktide can tend to have a bit of a blurry or muddy look to it at times, while Space Marine tends to be a lot more crisp. Even when you're whipping the camera around, Space Marine 2 recovers textures a lot quicker, so it tends to have the overall more crisp presentation. If you love visual clarity and everything looking as sharp as possible at all times, Space Marine 2 is gonna take the cake here. Lighting philosophy. Darktide leans heavily into ray trace atmospheric volumetrics, fog, smoke, and light diffusion, which sells the oppressive hive city feel but inherently softens image contrast and detail. Space Marine 2 uses cleaner baked-in lighting with more direct shadows and fewer persistent atmospheric filters, which makes models and surfaces pop more clearly to the eye. Art direction trade-off. While Space Marine 2 wins the technical clarity battle, Darktide gains back some ground in art direction and mood. Fat Shark's hive cities feel suffocating, claustrophobic, and lived in. The very blurriness from fog and grime adds to the immersion. Space Marine 2's cleaner, more heroic and cinematic, and you can freeze frame almost any shot for a crisp promo image, but it sometimes lacks the oppressive grime Darktide thrives on. My personal verdict, Space Marine 2 has set a new standard for clarity in online co-op shooters. The fact that Saber achieved this while maintaining stable performance in large-scale fights is impressive. Darktide is still a beautiful game, but its technical decisions put atmosphere ahead of sharpness. I do quickly have to give a nod to Darktide's music because Jesper Kid is a musical genius, and Darktide's tracks will go down as some of the best in video game history. Of course, visuals are only one part of the equation. My thoughts on both games come from hundreds of hours each, so here is section 6, my personal perspective. I love both games full stop. As a massive fan of the PvE horde shooter genre, they scratch that itch for that high skill, high intensity gameplay without the stress of PvP. You still get the thrill of pushing your limits, coordinating with others, and occasionally making new friends along the way. When I critique Space Marine 2, it's not to tear it down. down, it's because I poured hundreds of hours into it and want to see it reach its full potential. My goal is to see it thrive, not just at launch, but for years to come, and I'll be here covering it every step of the way. From where I stand today, Darktide is a stronger game in terms of mechanical depth and post-launch support, but Space Marine 2 outshines it in visual fidelity and the sheer coolness factor of being an Astartes, chainsword revving, surrounded by carnage. No other game makes you feel like an unstoppable force in quite the same way. Darktide may win on depth, but Space Marine 2 wins on spectacle, and spectacle matters. Whether it's gun strikes, executions, whirling the power sword around, it's why even players who move away from the game often come back when a new season drops just to experience that feeling again. And even though Space Marine 2 isn't as deep in the systems or itemization, something about the core gameplay loop is just really satisfying, and it's kept me coming back. If I had to only play one of these games and uninstall the other, it would be a really tough choice for me, because after getting into Darktide again for the making of this video, I've been having a blast, and I'm equally excited about Space Marine 2's second year of content, and part of me is still optimistically hoping that the devs get it right for year 2 and really help Space Marine 2 to be the amazing horde shooter I know it can be. One thing I didn't mention is Space Marine 2 has a full-on campaign mode, which is pretty dang good, and also a full-on PvP mode, so those definitely add a bit more value, although I think 80% of the player base is probably playing Siege or Operations most of the time. But I will say, I did play the campaign, and I've been thinking about going back through it on Angel of Death. So after all this, which game should you actually play? If you want layered builds, mission modifiers, and long-form mastery, play Darktide. If you want crisp clarity, highlight reel melee, addicting combat loop, and the pure Astartes fantasy, and a game you can just hop in and play without much fuss, play Space Marine 2. I mostly play Space Marine because that's what my YouTube channel is centered around, but Darktide is really fun. If I had to pick a winner between these two games right now, because I said I would at the beginning of the video, I think I would pick Darktide just based on the variety of content that it offers. There's a little more to do, but it has had a lot more time to cook, and I am really excited to see if the developers can really pick it up in year 2 for Space Marine, and hopefully it will become a really great game over time. Whichever you choose, in the darkness of the far future, there's only war and no shortage of enemies to crush beneath your boots, so get to playing, guys. If you guys enjoyed this video, drop a like on it for me, and if you've been enjoying my content, consider subscribing. If you like this kind of content, where if it's more of like a video essay, opinion piece, let me know down in the comments, and maybe I'll try to do more stuff like this in the future. Have a good one, guys.